Welcome to the Haunted Lounge, where shadows linger and the spirits flow. Join your host on a journey into the unexplained, sharing tales from the darkest corners of America. Ghosts, legends, and the pursuit of the truth behind them. Light a cigar, pour a drink, and pull up a chair. The night is just getting started.
Hi, welcome to the Haunted Lounge, where mysteries linger and the shadows speak. I'm your host, Dan. Tonight, we're pulling back the branches on one of North America's most enduring legends, Bigfoot. But not just any Bigfoot sightings. We're taking a dive into the stories where things took a dangerous turn. Injuries, fear, and even death. What happens when an encounter with the unknown is not just spooky, but it's dangerous? From the Pacific Northwest to the woodlots of Oklahoma, I'm bringing it back to our neck of the woods here at the Haunted Lounge, the hills of southeast Missouri. This is Bigfoot, when legends turn lethal. Our first account tonight was a story that was told by someone you may be familiar with, President Theodore Roosevelt, in his 1892 book, The Wilderness Hunter. In that book, he told a story that was relayed to him by a frontiersman named Bauman. Some speculate that, this may be a story that Roosevelt had himself, but didn't want the onus of a wild man or Bigfoot encounter on him, so he made up the name of Bauman to tell this story. But regardless, the story begins by the relation of this story, supposedly to Roosevelt, by a frontiersman named Bauman, who told him that in his youth he was trapping up near the confluence of the Salmon and the Wisdom Rivers in Idaho. It was an area that was considered cursed by locals. Now, why it was cursed, he didn't say, but other indigenous cultures just have areas that are bad land, and this was one. One reason it may be considered cursed, there was a solo hunter that was torn apart in this valley where they had decided to trap. When they arrived, they hiked up into the valley, leaving their horses tethered at the entrance, and found a meadow. Bauman told Roosevelt that the entire time they were going up, he felt like they were being watched, but discounted it because they were both seasoned woodsmen, and sometimes you just feel that way in the outdoors. They set up their camp, opened their packs, and immediately began to go out and set up traps. When they returned to the campsite, they found that their items had been scattered, their lean-to had been knocked down, and there were strange tracks in the dirt. They didn't pay much attention to the tracks as it was getting dark, but once they had got a fire going and got food started, Bauman said he grabbed a piece of burning wood from the fire and went to look at the tracks, thinking maybe it was a bear. These were large tracks, larger than a man's foot. And he told his partner, "Come look at these. This bear, if it is a bear, was walking on its hind legs." So they slept throughout the night, and in the morning went out to set traps. They came back early afternoon to find that their camp again had been torn apart. The lean-to was knocked down, their items were scattered around, and again, more tracks. There was a strong odor, that Bauman told Roosevelt, that smelled like meat or a skunk, and again, that feeling of being watched. Later that night, they heard on the other side of the creek from the campsite heavy footfalls and rocks being chucked into the campground. Bauman thought he might have seen what was doing it and fired one shot in its direction, and the activity ceased for the evening. The presence grew more unsettling the next day, and Bauman and the other trapper decided that This area was just too strange. Their tents were getting torn up, their supplies getting scattered. Something didn't want them there, and there were other places to trap. So they were packing up their gear. Bauman had 3 beaver traps that were still in a creek about a mile from camp. He went alone to gather those traps while the other trapper packed up camp. It took him longer than expected because one of the traps had gotten pulled out by a beaver that went into the dam. And when he returned, he found his trapping partner dead. His neck broken, fang marks on his neck, 4 teeth marks, and large footprints around his body as if something celebrated killing him. The best he could figure is once he finished packing up camp, his partner sat down on a log facing the fire with his back to the woods where they had been seeing the shadow figure and smelling that smell, feeling like they were being watched, and something was able to creep up on him, stretch his neck out, breaking it, and then bite his throat. Bauman fled the woods and never would go back in that area. Roosevelt said that he felt like Bauman was telling the truth because during the story he would shudder, and he just got the feeling that he was being sincere. So what was it? Wild man, unknown predator, or something else? We'll never know, but the fear that Bauman had, as related by Roosevelt, was for sure real. Moving forward to 1924, our story also moves to Washington State in the area of Mount St. Helens. There were a group of 5 prospectors led by Fred Beck, Gabe Lefevre, and John Peterson. They're mining for gold near Mount St. Helens. These guys were tough men, and they were accustomed to hard work and isolation in the wilderness. They realized, though, that something wasn't right. For days, the men reported seeing massive, human-like footprints in the volcanic ash around their area. Beck even claimed to have seen a creature watching them from behind a tree. It was described as huge, hairy, ape-like, and over 7 feet tall. Then one night it happened. Just after midnight, the men's cabin came under siege. Large rocks were being hurled against the roof and walls of the cabin. Shadows moved in the darkness. At one point, something even reached through the gap in the logs. Fred Beck opened fire. The assault lasted for hours. The men described multiple creatures howling, shrieking as they circled the cabin, throwing stones and trying to break in. Come morning, the group fled in terror. When they told the story, the press dubbed it Mountain Devils. The canyon where the attack occurred, it's now known as Ape Canyon. Skeptics said it was just nerves, maybe a prank or even a bear, but none of the men ever went back. Fast forward to the year 2000. We move across the country to a small town known as Honobia, Oklahoma. Nestled in the thick forest of the Kiamachi Mountains. This story details the happenings of a family that lived on 30 acres in the wilderness near this town. Families started noticing that a shed that they had on the property, which contained a large chest freezer, was being looted by something. The family survived on deer meat, and haunches of deer meat were being stolen out of this freezer. They noticed large tracks, and the dogs would often act odd. They were never able to figure out exactly what was going on. This continued for months until they started seeing large shadow-like creatures in the woods. They also noticed that the population of deer were decreasing in the area. For weeks, they claimed they had been experiencing bizarre nighttime activities. Rocks being thrown at the house, strange howls, mutilated deer left on the property. The family tried whatever they could. One thing was leaving food scraps at the edge of the woods, perhaps in an attempt to appease whatever was watching them. But things escalated. One night, he and his brother were forced to exchange gunfire with multiple large creatures. They claimed to see glowing eyes in the tree line and movement in the brush, fast, upright figures. The brothers contacted a group of Bigfoot researchers who actually had a researcher come out to the property with the brothers and witnessed all of this occurring. Rocks thrown at the house. The wives and children that lived there moved out of the house to other relatives because something was picking at pieces of the window trying to gain access to the house. The siege continued for 2 nights after the researchers got there, though no bodies were ever recovered and no injuries were officially documented. The thing they did find was another deer carcass, and this was verified by the research organization, that was laying outside of the visual line of the cabin into the trees. They had thought they had maybe injured one of the Bigfoot because there was a blood trail, but it turned out it went to a deer carcass. They said that the carcass had the neck twisted open and all of the internal organs pulled out through the top of the ribs. The abdominal cavity wasn't opened, but the organs had been pulled out of the top of the ribs, and it was twisted, not cut. To do that, the amount of strength that would be required is pretty impressive. After this, the family decided that even though this was family land that was generational, they couldn't stay. They ended up moving away after this incident. One of the researchers put forth a theory that perhaps the family hunting deer and injuring them but not finding them led the creatures to start associating that area with an area of easy game. The deer are wounded trying to get away from the hunters. Wounded animal is a lot easier to catch than a non-injured one. That was one theory that was put forth. Whatever happened, this was an incident that ended up getting a documentary made called The Siege of Honobia. You can find that on social media to get further information. We're going to bring things back to the home area of the Haunted Lounge now. We're coming to the hills of Missouri, the Show Me State. In July of 1972, the sleepy town of Louisiana, Missouri was rocked by reports of a strange, hairy creature stalking the woods near the Mississippi River. Witnesses described it as over 7 feet tall, covered in shaggy black hair, and unlike the other Bigfoot reports, the creature that they dubbed Momo had a large pumpkin-shaped head and glowing orange eyes. It also reeked of rot and decay. Possibly the most famous sighting came from the Harrison family. A woman by the name of Doris Harrison had her children playing in the backyard. She looked out to check on them and saw this creature standing at the edge of the woods holding what looked to be a dead dog. The boys ran inside terrified. This creature was also seen by the fire chief, members of the city council, local law enforcement, and for weeks afterward, residents reported strange howls, mutilated animals, glowing eyes in the night, and some claimed the monster threw rocks at passing cars. The town organized a posse, and men with shotguns climbed into the forest, but Momo, as they dubbed it, was never found. The hysteria died down, but the legend stuck, and today Momo the monster is one of Missouri's very own Bigfoots, and it may be its most terrifying. This next story isn't as well known, but if you live near Crowley's Ridge, you may have heard about it. In the fall of 1996, a man named Jeff Whitlow, a local hunter from Bollinger County, went missing overnight after a routine solo hunting trip. He was found the next morning shaken and incoherent by a search party. He had camped near a wooded stretch of Crowley's Ridge, and according to later interviews, Jeff claimed that he had heard strange talking in the woods. Not words, but a kind of mimicry. Then loud crashing, as if something huge was circling his tent. The next morning, his tent was shredded. 2 of his hunting dogs were dead, found yards away, necks broken, and odd 5-toed tracks were found nearby, larger than a man's boot. All this was discovered by the search party when they went back to check the area. Jeff wanted none of it. He moved away the following spring, refused to talk about the incident publicly again. Some of the locals still say that something strange lives along that ridge, watching, waiting. Speaking of Crowley's Ridge, I lived close to there, owned a farm close to there, and had an event one night that left me wondering about the validity and truth of Bigfoot. Took my dog out about 2:30 in the morning one morning onto the back porch. She went out into the yard to do what dogs do at 2:30 in the morning, sniff around and pretend to go to the bathroom. While I was out there and she was doing her thing, a howl started. It was about a quarter mile from the farm and continued to go and go and go. It sounded like one of the old air raid sirens. The dog immediately finished what she was doing, ran up onto the porch with her hackles up, and was scratching at the door. She's not faint of heart, usually. And after listening to this, whatever made it, it was not human lungs. It was too long, too loud, too low, and it just kept going. I thought I'd probably better follow my dog's instincts, and we went inside. Was it Bigfoot? I don't know. Whatever it was, it sounded like other howls that I've heard put forth by folks claiming that it was Bigfoot. So I started looking into Bigfoot sightings in the area and ran across the one that we presented tonight, as well as several others going back over the course of years. So, what is this phenomenon that we're talking about tonight? Is it a Gigantopithecus, some leftover remnant from the past, some shy creature that's just trying to remain unmolested and unbothered in the wilderness? Is it as others have suggested? David Pilates from the Missing 411 series, interdimensional traveler. Can it step through doorways and gates? Is it just a spirit of the great outdoors, the nature, the old earth that we're running across? Something that, for lack of better, is the wild wanting to remain wild. I don't have the answers, but I'm going to keep looking, because after having a minor brush with this, it's one of the parts of the paranormal that now fascinates me. I hope it fascinated you this evening as well with the presentation of some of these stories. If you have any questions, as always, make contact with us at the Haunted Lounge podcast at gmail.com or via a message on our Facebook page. And tell me your stories. Have you had an encounter? Did you run across one of these out in the wild? If so, where and what happened? I want to share this experience with you as listeners. This is a collaborative effort to try to understand things. As always, with the Haunted Lounge podcast, you can find us on pretty much any social media. And again, as always, keep your drinks full and your mind open. Thanks for joining this evening. Good night.